Marcus Chen had always believed that a wrench was worth exactly what it could fix. But, when he accidentally crashed the galactic economy with a single repair estimate, he realized that humans might have been looking at value all wrong, or perhaps, everyone else had been doing it backwards for the past 10,000 years. What started as a simple job fixing a broken hyperdrive would unravel the greatest economic mystery in known space, proving once again that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their weapons, or their diplomacy. It was their stubborn refusal to accept that things had to be the way they'd always been. Sometimes the most revolutionary discoveries come from the most ordinary people asking the most obvious questions. This is the story of how a grease-stained mechanic from Earth became the most wanted economist in the galaxy, and why 3 different alien empires would go to war over his calculator. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades and squinted at the alien starship hovering 3 feet off the deck of his repair bay. The vessel looked like someone had taken a perfectly good spaceship and decided it needed more tentacles. Purple ones. That glowed. So let me get this straight, Marcus said to the creature standing beside him. The Zephyrian looked like a cross between an octopus and a disco ball, with crystalline skin that shifted colors when it moved. Your hyperdrive makes that noise because the quantum flux inhibitor is out of alignment with the temporal resonance chamber? The alien's translator crackled. Precisely, human Marcus. The malfunction occurred during our journey from the Centauri trade hub. We require immediate repair to maintain our delivery schedule to the Outer Rim colonies. Marcus nodded, though he was still getting used to aliens who spoke like they'd swallowed a technical manual. 3 months ago, first contact had changed everything. 3 weeks ago, Earth had been accepted into the Galactic Trade Consortium. And, 3 days ago, Marcus had opened the first human-operated starship repair shop in the galaxy, mostly because nobody else wanted to deal with the insurance paperwork. He grabbed his tablet and started making notes. The repair itself would be straightforward enough. The Zephyrians built their ships like they built everything else, unnecessarily complicated but surprisingly reliable once you figured out which glowing thing connected to which other glowing thing. The quantum flux inhibitor just needed to be realigned and calibrated, maybe an hour's work for someone who knew their way around exotic matter conduits. What's your ship worth? Marcus asked, stylus poised over his tablet. The Zephyrian's skin shifted to a confused shade of turquoise. Worth? We do not understand the query. You know, market value. What would it cost to replace the ship if something happened to it? The alien consulted a device that looked like a jellyfish made of glass. Current replacement value is approximately 47,000 universal credits, based on standard Galactic Trade Consortium valuation protocols. Marcus whistled low. 47,000 credits was serious money, even in the inflated galactic economy. He'd looked up the exchange rate that morning, about 15,000 Earth dollars per credit, which meant this particular flying octopus house was worth more than most small cities. Okay, and how long have you owned it? This vessel was acquired new approximately 7 standard years ago. What did you pay for it then? Another consultation with the jellyfish device. Purchase price was 47,000 universal credits. Marcus paused, stylus hovering over the tablet. Wait, it cost the same 7 years ago as it's worth now? Correct. That doesn't make sense. Things depreciate. They lose value over time, especially complex machinery. Wear and tear, obsolescence, newer models coming out. He trailed off at the increasingly confused colors rippling across the Zephyrian's skin. Depreciation? We are unfamiliar with this concept. Marcus set down his tablet and really looked at the alien for the first time since it had walked into his shop. You're telling me that in the entire galactic economy, nothing loses value over time? Why would it? The Galactic Trade Consortium established the Universal Credit System to maintain stable values across all member species. All goods and services are assigned fixed values based on resource content and complexity algorithms. These values remain constant to ensure fair trade. But that's... Marcus started to say insane but caught himself. He was still learning galactic diplomacy. That's interesting. What about supply and demand? Market forces? Competition? The Zephyrian's skin had gone completely gray, which Marcus was learning meant they were either thinking very hard or about to be sick. These concepts are not part of the consortium's economic model. The consortium determines all values scientifically, based on quantifiable metrics. This eliminates the chaos and inefficiency of primitive market-based systems. Marcus picked up his tablet again, but his mind was racing. A fixed value economy across dozens of species and thousands of worlds? No competition, no market forces, no depreciation? It sounded like the kind of system economists back on Earth used as examples of what not to do. How do you handle innovation? New technology that makes old stuff obsolete? When new technologies are introduced, the consortium's economic council analyzes their resource content and complexity, then assigns them appropriate values within the existing framework. Old technologies maintain their assigned values unless the council determines otherwise. So if someone invented a better hyperdrive tomorrow, your old one would still be worth exactly what it's worth today? Naturally. Value is intrinsic, determined by the scientific analysis of the consortium's experts. Marcus rubbed his temples. He could feel a headache coming on, and it wasn't just from the weird lighting in the alien ship. Okay, let's table the economics lesson for now. Let me get a look at this quantum flux inhibitor. He grabbed his toolkit, a collection of Earth tools modified with alien tech he'd bought from a helpful trader who'd assured him they were perfectly safe for human use, probably, and followed the Zephyrian into the ship. The interior looked like someone had designed it while having a fever dream about crystals. Everything was smooth, curved surfaces that pulsed with soft light. The hyperdrive chamber was at the ship's heart, a room filled with what Marcus could only describe as controlled lightning held in place by geometry that hurt to look at directly. There, the Zephyrian pointed with one of its tentacle arms at a device that looked like a translucent pinecone floating in a field of blue sparks. The quantum flux inhibitor shows signs of temporal displacement. Marcus pulled out his scanner, another alien gadget he was still learning to trust, and took readings. The device was definitely out of alignment, its quantum signature drifting about 15% from optimal parameters. Nothing too serious, but enough to make the hyperdrive sound like a dying whale every time they dropped out of FTL. I can fix this, he said. Realignment and recalibration, maybe replace a couple of the quantum resonance crystals if they've degraded too much. Should have you back on your way in a couple hours. Excellent. What is the cost for this service? Marcus had been dreading this question. Pricing alien repairs was tricky when you didn't have any reference points. Too high and you'd never get customers. Too low and you'd go out of business faster than you could say exotic matter containment failure. He'd done his homework, though. The Galactic Trade Consortium had standardized repair rates, just like everything else. Hyperdrive repairs were classified as complex technical services, Class 7, and billed at a flat rate of 50 credits per hour, regardless of what was actually wrong or how long it took to fix. Standard rate is 50 credits per hour, Marcus said. Figure 2 hours for the job, so 100 credits total. The Zephyrian's skin shifted through several colors Marcus hadn't seen before. 100 credits? For a simple realignment procedure? That's the standard rate, according to the consortium's service manual. Human Marcus, we believe there has been an error. Our vessel is worth 47,000 credits. A repair representing 0.2% of its total value cannot possibly require such compensation. Marcus frowned. Why not? The job's the job, regardless of what the ship's worth. If anything, I should probably charge more since I'm working on expensive equipment. That is not how galactic commerce functions. Repair costs are calculated as percentages of total value, not arbitrary hourly rates. For a vessel of this value, appropriate compensation for a minor repair would be approximately 4 to 5 credits. 4 credits? Marcus did the math in his head. 4 credits was about $60. For 2 hours of skilled technical work on a hyperdrive worth more than most Earth cities. That's insane. Nobody could stay in business charging that little. Nevertheless, that is the established rate structure throughout the galaxy. All repair services follow this model. Marcus sat back on his heels, mind spinning. A percentage-based repair economy? where the cost of fixing something depended not on how hard it was to fix, but on how much the total object was worth. What if I was fixing a small personal shuttle worth, say, 1,000 credits? Then, appropriate compensation for the same repair would be approximately 0.8 to 1.0 credits. And if I was working on a massive cargo hauler worth 1,000,000 credits? Appropriate compensation would be approximately 2,000 to 2,500 credits. Marcus set down his tools and really looked at the Zephyrian. So the exact same job, requiring the exact same skills and taking the exact same amount of time, gets paid anywhere from 1 credit to 2,500 credits depending on what ship I'm working on? Correct. This ensures proportional compensation relative to the client's investment. But what about the mechanic's investment? Training, tools, time, expertise? That's all worth the same regardless of what ship they're working on. The Zephyrian's skin had gone gray again. We had not considered this perspective. Marcus stood up, brushing dust off his coveralls. His mind was working overtime, pieces of a puzzle starting to fit together in ways that didn't make sense. A galaxy-wide economy with fixed values, no depreciation, no market forces, and percentage-based service pricing that ignored the actual cost of providing those services. Tell me something, he said slowly. How long has this economic system been in place? The Universal Credit System was established approximately 9,000 standard years ago, shortly after the formation of the Galactic Trade Consortium. It replaced dozens of incompatible local currencies and barter systems. And, in 9,000 years, nobody's ever questioned whether it actually works? Why would they question it? The system is stable, predictable, and fair. It has eliminated the economic warfare and market manipulation that plagued earlier civilizations. Marcus picked up his tablet and started making calculations. 9,000 years of economic stagnation. No wonder First Contact had been such a shock. Earth's economy was a chaotic mess of market forces, competition, innovation, and creative destruction that somehow managed to create more wealth than it destroyed. The galactic economy, by comparison, was a perfectly balanced machine that never changed, never grew, and never allowed anyone to build anything better than what came before. Human Marcus, the Zephyrian said, its skin shifting to what Marcus was learning was an anxious shade of orange. You appear distressed. Is there a problem with the repair? No problem with the repair, Marcus said absently, still running numbers on his tablet. I'm just trying to figure out how your entire economy doesn't collapse under its own weight. The consortium's economic model is highly stable. Collapse is impossible under a fixed value system. Maybe, Marcus muttered. Or maybe it collapsed a long time ago and nobody noticed because nothing's allowed to change anyway. He looked up at the Zephyrian, who was now cycling through colors like a confused rainbow. Tell you what. I'll fix your hyperdrive, and we'll figure out the payment later. But I've got some questions about this economic system of yours, and I think you might want to hear the answers. Questions? Yeah. Like why a galaxy full of intelligent species can't figure out that a wrench is worth what it can fix, not what percentage of your bank account you happen to have that day. Marcus picked up his tools and got back to work on the quantum flux inhibitor, but his mind was already racing ahead. Something was very wrong with the galactic economy, something so fundamentally broken that 9,000 years of stable prices had hidden the rot underneath. And he was starting to suspect that the solution might be as simple as asking the one question nobody had bothered to ask in 9 millennia: what if there was a better way? The quantum flux inhibitor hummed back to life under his hands, perfectly aligned and calibrated. Just like everything else in the galaxy, it worked exactly as advertised. The only question was whether working as advertised was good enough anymore. Outside the ship, Marcus could hear the familiar sounds of his repair bay, the hiss of hydraulics, the whir of diagnostic equipment, the occasional curse when someone dropped a tool. Normal, everyday sounds of people fixing things and getting paid for their work. But now those sounds carried a new weight. Every tool, every repair, every transaction was part of an economic puzzle that spanned the galaxy. And somewhere in that puzzle was a piece that didn't fit, a variable that nobody had accounted for in 9,000 years of careful calculations. Marcus smiled as he made the final adjustments to the alien hyperdrive. He'd always been good at finding the pieces that didn't fit. Now he was about to find out what happened when you tried to put them back together. 3 days after the Zephyrian ship had departed with its newly repaired hyperdrive, Marcus found himself staring at his workshop's financial records with growing confusion. He'd done 17 more repairs since then, everything from a mantoid cargo hauler with a faulty gravity generator to a crystalline research vessel with a broken atmospheric processor. Each job had been straightforward enough, but the payment negotiations had left him feeling like he was trying to solve a puzzle while someone kept changing the pieces. The mantoid had paid him 8 credits for 6 hours of work because their ship was only worth 1,600 credits total. The crystalline researchers had handed over nearly 3,000 credits for the exact same atmospheric processor repair because their vessel was valued at 6 million credits. Same work, same parts, same amount of time, but wildly different compensation based solely on what percentage of the ship's value the repair represented. Marcus rubbed his eyes and reached for another cup of coffee, the real Earth stuff he'd managed to smuggle through customs. The galactic equivalent tasted like burnt plastic and regret. His tablet chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Dr. Kex Valix, Economic Council Representative, Galactic Trade Consortium. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. The message was brief and formal. Human Marcus Chen. Your recent service transactions have triggered automated review protocols. Report to Consortium Economic Council Station Gamma 7 within 48 standard hours for economic compliance evaluation. Non-compliance will result in immediate suspension of trade privileges. Well, that's not ominous at all, Marcus muttered, forwarding the message to his legal advisor, a helpful AI that Earth's government had insisted all human businesses use when dealing with galactic commerce. The AI's response came back almost immediately, warning, Economic Council investigations typically occur only when major violations of trade law have been detected. Recommend immediate consultation with legal representation and review of all recent transactions for compliance issues. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling of his workshop. What could he have possibly done wrong? He'd followed the consortium's repair rate guidelines to the letter, even when they made no economic sense. He'd filed all the proper forms, paid all the appropriate fees, and hadn't charged anyone more than the established percentages. Unless. Marcus sat up straight, pulling up his transaction records again. He'd been thinking about the percentage-based pricing system ever since the Zephyrian visit, running calculations in his spare time. The math was straightforward enough. Repair costs were supposed to represent between 0.1% and 0.5% of a vessel's total value, depending on the complexity of the work. Simple repairs stayed on the low end, complex ones went higher. But Marcus had started calculating something else, the actual value of the work being performed. Time, expertise, materials, overhead, the real cost of providing repair services. When he compared those numbers to what the consortium's system allowed him to charge, the discrepancy was staggering. For expensive ships, he was being overpaid by factors of 10 or even 20. For cheap ships, he was being underpaid by similar margins. The percentage system meant that fixing a 1,000,000 credit luxury yacht paid him enough to live comfortably for months, while fixing a 1,000 credit personal shuttle barely covered his material costs. Most mechanics across the galaxy seemed to handle this by specializing in expensive ships and avoiding cheap ones entirely. But Marcus had been accepting all comers, partly because he needed the practice and partly because turning away customers went against every business instinct he'd developed back on Earth. The result was a repair log that probably looked insane to anyone analyzing it from a galactic perspective. He'd performed identical repairs for vastly different payments, charged the same rates for completely different amounts of work, and generally ignored every economic principle the galaxy had operated on for 9,000 years. Marcus grabbed his toolkit and headed for the door. Station Gamma 7 was a 3-hour flight from Earth, and he wanted to get there early enough to figure out what he was walking into before the actual meeting. The station was a massive construct orbiting a brown dwarf, its crystalline architecture gleaming with the soft light of controlled fusion reactions. As Marcus docked his shuttle and made his way through the customs checkpoints, he couldn't help but notice the complete lack of activity in what should have been a bustling commercial hub. A few maintenance drones drifted through empty corridors, but he saw maybe a dozen organic beings in the entire station. The Economic Council offices occupied the station's central hub, a vast spherical chamber filled with floating platforms connected by streams of light that served as transportation. Marcus had to admit it was impressive, even if it seemed designed more for intimidation than efficiency. Dr. Kexvalix turned out to be a mantoid, one of the insectoid species Marcus had encountered several times since opening his shop. She stood nearly 7 feet tall on 4 legs, with 2 arms that ended in delicate manipulator claws and compound eyes that tracked his movement as he approached her platform. "Human Marcus Chen," she said, her translator rendering her clicking vocalizations in a crisp, professional tone. "Your arrival is timely. We have much to discuss. So I gathered from your message. What exactly am I supposed to have done wrong?" Dr. Kexvalix gestured to a holographic display that materialized between them. Marcus's repair records hung in the air, color-coded and annotated with symbols he didn't recognize. "Your transaction patterns indicate severe economic irregularities," she said. "Analysis suggests either gross incompetence in valuation procedures or deliberate manipulation of established pricing protocols." Marcus studied the display. Red markers highlighted repairs where he charged significantly less than the maximum allowed percentage. Green markers showed jobs where he charged near the maximum. Yellow markers indicated repairs that had taken longer or shorter than the consortium's standard estimates. "I don't see the problem," Marcus said. "I followed the pricing guidelines for every job." "The problem, human Marcus, is that you followed them too literally. No rational economic actor operates within such narrow margins. Your pricing patterns suggest either a fundamental misunderstanding of galactic commerce or an attempt to manipulate market conditions." "Manipulate how?" "I charged what the guidelines said I could charge." Dr. Kexvalix's compound eyes fixed on him with laser intensity. "Precisely. The guidelines exist as theoretical maximums, not operational targets. No legitimate repair service charges the full allowable percentage except under extraordinary circumstances." Marcus felt like the floor had suddenly become quicksand. "What percentage am I supposed to charge?" "Industry standard is approximately 60 to 70% of the maximum allowable rate. This accounts for competitive pressures and maintains stable profit margins across all service providers." "Competitive pressures?" Marcus repeated. "But I thought the consortium set all the prices to eliminate competition." "Competition between different types of services, not between providers of the same service. The fixed value system ensures that a hyperdrive repair costs the same regardless of which mechanic performs it, but market forces still determine what percentage of that fixed price any individual mechanic can command." Marcus sat down heavily on the nearest chair, his mind reeling. The galactic economy wasn't just a fixed value system, it was a fixed value system with an invisible layer of market dynamics operating underneath it. Mechanics competed for customers by offering discounts from the official rates, creating a shadow economy where the real prices bore only passing resemblance to the consortium's published guidelines. So when I charged full rates, I was essentially pricing myself out of the market? Worse. You were demonstrating either ignorance of established practices or contempt for them. Both are cause for investigation. And, when I accepted jobs that other mechanics wouldn't take because the pay was too low? You were engaging in predatory pricing designed to undercut competitors and destabilize local service markets. Marcus laughed, a sound that came out more bitter than amused. So I'm in trouble for charging too much and for charging too little simultaneously. Correct. Your behavior patterns are inconsistent with any recognizable economic model. Maybe that's because I'm using a different economic model. Dr. Kexvalix's antennae twitched. Explain. Marcus stood up and gestured at the holographic display. You see irregularities and manipulation. I see a pricing system that makes no sense. Why should fixing a hyperdrive cost different amounts depending on what ship it's installed in? The work is the same, the skills are the same, the time is the same. The only thing that changes is how much money the customer happens to have. The percentage system ensures proportional fairness. Wealthy clients pay more because they can afford more, while poor clients pay less to maintain access to essential services. But it doesn't ensure proportional fairness to the service provider. I could spend a week fixing a complicated problem on a cheap ship and barely cover my costs, or I could spend an hour on a simple fix for an expensive ship and make more than most people see in a year. How is that fair? Dr. Kexvalix was quiet for a long moment, her compound eyes scanning through data streams that flowed across her personal interface. What alternative would you propose? Marcus pulled out his tablet and connected it to the station's display system. His own calculations appeared alongside the consortium's data, showing repair costs broken down by actual time, materials, and complexity rather than ship value. Charge based on what the work is actually worth. Time plus materials plus a reasonable profit margin. If someone wants their hyperdrive fixed, they pay the cost of fixing a hyperdrive, not some arbitrary percentage of what their ship happens to be worth. That system would create severe inequalities. Owners of expensive ships would pay the same repair costs as owners of cheap ships, eliminating the economic advantages of scale. What economic advantages of scale? A hyperdrive is a hyperdrive. Fixing one on a 1,000,000 credit yacht doesn't cost any less than fixing one on a 1,000 credit shuttle. If anything, the expensive ship probably has more complex systems that make the job harder. Dr. Kexvalix began pacing, her four legs carrying her in tight circles around the platform. Your proposal would fundamentally disrupt established economic relationships. Small ship owners would be priced out of repair services entirely. Not if the real cost of repairs is actually less than what the current system charges them. Look at my numbers. When I calculated the actual cost of the work I've been doing, most of the small ship repairs should cost more like 2 or 3 credits, not the fractions of credits the percentage system produces. Marcus highlighted several transactions on the display. This vegan trader paid me half a credit to fix his atmospheric recycler. Half a credit. The materials alone cost more than that. I lost money on the job, but, according to your system, that's what the work was worth. The system ensures stability, the system ensures stagnation. Nobody can afford to innovate because the pricing structure makes it impossible to recover development costs. Nobody can specialize in difficult repairs because the payment doesn't reflect the increased skill required. Nobody can build a sustainable business because half your customers pay you less than cost while the other half overpay by ridiculous amounts. Dr. Kexvalix stopped pacing. These criticisms have been raised before. The Economic Council has studied numerous alternative systems and determined that fixed value pricing provides optimal stability across diverse species and economic conditions. When was the last time you studied alternatives? The most recent comprehensive analysis was completed approximately 4,000 years ago. Marcus stared at her. 4,000 years? You haven't looked at new economic models in 4,000 years? No new models have been proposed. The fixed value system has successfully eliminated the economic chaos that plagued earlier civilizations. It's eliminated economic growth, too. When was the last time someone invented something that actually made life better instead of just meeting the consortium's complexity requirements? Dr. Kexvalix's antennae drooped. Innovation continues within approved parameters. That's not innovation, that's iteration. Real innovation means trying things that might fail, taking risks, building something that might be better than what came before. Your system makes that impossible because there's no way to price truly new ideas. Marcus pulled up another set of calculations, these ones focused on Earth's economic history. Look at this. Pre-contact Earth had market crashes, recessions, economic inequality, all the problems your system was designed to solve. But we also had continuous innovation, rising living standards, and economic growth that lifted billions of people out of poverty over just a few centuries. Your planet's economy was notoriously unstable, yes. But dynamic. Things got better over time, sometimes rapidly. When's the last time life in the galaxy got meaningfully better for anyone? Dr. Kexvalix was quiet for several minutes, processing data streams too fast for Marcus to follow. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its professional certainty. You propose to replace a system that has maintained galactic peace and stability for 9 millennia with the chaotic market forces that characterize your homeworld's economic development. I'm proposing that maybe peace and stability aren't worth much if they come at the cost of progress and prosperity. Your galaxy has been economically frozen for 9,000 years. Earth went from stone tools to faster-than-light travel in less than 10,000 years, and most of that happened in the last few centuries when our economic systems became dynamic enough to reward innovation. Marcus gestured at the empty station around them. How many people work here? This facility operates with a staff of 43 economic analysts and support personnel. 43 people to manage the economy of dozens of species across thousands of worlds. That's not efficient administration, that's economic death by bureaucracy. The system requires minimal oversight because it is inherently stable, it requires minimal oversight because nothing ever changes. But systems that don't change eventually break down, and, when they do, they break hard because nobody remembers how to fix them. Dr. Kexvalix settled onto her haunches, a position Marcus was learning indicated deep thought among the mantoids. Assuming your analysis has merit, what would you recommend as a transitional approach? Complete system replacement would require approval from all consortium member species, a process that typically requires several centuries of debate. Marcus grinned. I wouldn't recommend system replacement. I'd recommend letting people opt out. Opt out? Create an alternative economic zone. Let anyone who wants to try market-based pricing do business under different rules. See what happens. If it works better than the current system, people will switch voluntarily. If it doesn't, no harm done. The Council would never approve such an experiment. The risk to establish trade relationships is exactly zero, as long as participation is voluntary. You keep your fixed value system for anyone who wants it, and create a free trade zone for anyone who wants to try something different. Best of both worlds. Dr. Kexvalix stood up abruptly. This conversation has provided significant food for thought, human Marcus. Your immediate compliance violations will be noted as resulting from cultural misunderstandings rather than deliberate malfeasance. However, I strongly recommend that you conform to established practices while conducting business within consortium space. And, if I don't want to conform? Then, you may find that Earth's newly granted trade privileges become subject to review. Marcus nodded slowly. The threat was politely delivered, but it was still a threat. I understand. Thank you for the clarification. As he made his way back to his shuttle, Marcus found himself thinking about the empty corridors and automated systems that seemed to run everything in the station. 9,000 years of economic stability had created a galaxy where innovation was discouraged, efficiency was irrelevant, and progress had been sacrificed for the illusion of fairness. But it was still an illusion, built on assumptions that nobody had questioned in millennia. And, now that someone finally had, Marcus was beginning to suspect that the consortium's economic system wasn't just inefficient, it was actively preventing the galaxy from becoming everything it could be. The question was whether anyone else was ready to hear that message, or whether 9,000 years of stability had made the galaxy too afraid of change to consider alternatives. Marcus fired up his shuttle's engines and set course for Earth. He had some research to do, and some very interesting phone calls to make. If the consortium wasn't ready for economic innovation, maybe it was time to show them what they'd been missing. 2 weeks after his meeting with the Economic Council, Marcus found himself in the most unlikely place he could imagine, the executive boardroom of Chen Industries, the aerospace company his sister had built into one of Earth's major suppliers for the colonial expansion program. Sarah Chen sat across from him, her expression cycling between amusement and concern as she reviewed the economic data he'd compiled. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Sarah said, setting down the tablet containing his analysis. You want to create an alternative economic system for interstellar trade, starting with a small group of human businesses, and you think this will somehow convince a galaxy-spanning civilization to abandon 9,000 years of established economic policy? When you put it like that, it sounds impossible, Marcus admitted. But, look at the numbers, Sarah. Their system is broken. Not just inefficient, fundamentally, mathematically broken. It's only held together this long because nobody's been allowed to try anything else. Sarah walked to the window wall of her office, which offered a spectacular view of Earth's orbital shipyards. Dozens of vessels were under construction, everything from small research ships to massive colony transports. Earth was building for the future with an energy that Marcus hadn't seen anywhere else in the galaxy. The political implications alone could get Earth kicked out of the consortium, she said. Dad didn't spend 15 years negotiating our membership so you could blow it up with an economics experiment. Dad spent 15 years getting us into a system that's designed to prevent economic growth. We're the new kids, Sarah. We get all the restrictions and none of the benefits. How many human businesses have actually turned a profit trading with alien species? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Not many. The percentage-based pricing makes it almost impossible to build sustainable trade relationships. That's because the system isn't designed to create prosperity. It's designed to prevent change. But Earth is already changing things just by being ourselves. Marcus pulled up another display on the room's main screen. I've been tracking human-alien trade relationships since first contact. Look at this pattern. The data showed a clear trend. Human businesses consistently operated at narrow profit margins when dealing with alien customers, while alien businesses trading with humans showed unusually high profitability. The disparity was subtle but persistent across every sector of the economy. Human businesses price based on cost plus reasonable profit, Marcus continued. Alien businesses price based on what the consortium guidelines allow them to charge. The result is that we're accidentally undercutting the entire galactic economy by charging what services are actually worth instead of what the system says they should cost. Sarah turned back to him. So we're already disrupting their system whether we mean to or not. Exactly. The question is whether we do it accidentally and get blamed for economic instability, or whether we do it deliberately and show them a better way. And if the better way doesn't work? Marcus grinned. Then, we'll have learned something valuable, which is more than the galaxy has done in the last 4 millennia. Sarah sat back down and activated her personal AI assistant. Aria, pull up our trade analysis for the past 6 months. I want to see profit margins on all alien contracts, broken down by sector and partner species. The AI's response came through the room's speakers in a pleasant female voice. Trade analysis complete, Ms. Chen. Average profit margin on alien contracts is 2.3%, compared to 12.7% on purely human contracts. Primary disparity appears to be in service sector pricing, where alien customers consistently pay below market rates for equivalent services. Below market rates by whose definition? Marcus asked. Earth market rates, Aria clarified. Alien customers are paying prices consistent with Galactic Trade Consortium guidelines, which appear to systematically undervalue service sector labor by factors ranging from 200% to 1,500%. Sarah whistled low. No wonder human service companies are struggling. We're being paid a fraction of what our work is actually worth. It gets worse, Marcus said. The system also prevents us from competing effectively in alien markets. When I try to bid on repair jobs in alien systems, I have to quote prices based on their percentage system. But the percentage system means I'm either charging way too much for simple jobs or way too little for complex ones. There's no way to build a reputation for quality work because the pricing doesn't reflect the value I provide. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, studying the data flows across multiple screens. Finally, she looked up at Marcus with the expression he remembered from their childhood, the one that meant she was about to do something their parents would disapprove of. What exactly are you proposing? A free trade zone. Earth businesses that want to opt out of consortium pricing can do business with each other using market-based rates. We prove the system works, build some success stories, and then invite alien businesses to join voluntarily. The consortium will never allow it. The consortium doesn't get to allow or disallow what Earth does within its own economic sphere. We're members, not subjects. And if we can demonstrate that market pricing creates more prosperity for everyone involved, they might be willing to consider reforms. Sarah activated another screen, this one showing Earth's current trade relationships and diplomatic status. The political risks are enormous. If this backfires, it could damage human-alien relations for generations. If we don't try it, human-alien trade relationships are going to fail anyway. Look at the numbers, we can't sustain 2% profit margins indefinitely. Either we find a way to make galactic trade profitable for human businesses, or we'll end up economically isolated whether we want to be or not. And, you think a mechanic from Ohio is qualified to redesign galactic economics? Marcus laughed. I think a mechanic from Ohio might be exactly what galactic economics needs. I'm not approaching this from economic theory or political ideology. I'm approaching it from the practical question of how to run a sustainable business. And, right now, the galactic system makes that impossible. Sarah stood up and began pacing, a habit she'd inherited from their father. Assuming I could convince the board to support this, and that's a very big assumption, how would it work in practice? Start small. Chen Industries has contracts with about 40 other human companies for various services and supplies, right? Instead of pricing those contracts according to consortium guidelines, price them according to actual market value. Track the results for 6 months, then compare profitability and efficiency to your alien contracts. And then, if it works, we expand. Invite other human companies to join the free trade zone. Create a parallel economy that operates on market principles instead of fixed values. Show the galaxy what economic growth looks like. Sarah stopped pacing and stared out at the shipyards again. You know what the really crazy part is? It might actually work. Earth's economy has been growing faster in the past 3 months than most galactic civilizations have grown in the past 3 centuries. If we could scale that kind of growth across interstellar trade, we demonstrate that the consortium's economic model isn't just inefficient, it's actively harmful to prosperity. Or we'd crash the galactic economy and start the first interstellar trade war in recorded history. Marcus shrugged. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. In this case, the eggs happen to be diplomatic relationships with dozens of alien species, Marcus. Sarah, look at those numbers again. Human businesses are already failing under the current system. We're not risking prosperity by trying something different, we're risking continued stagnation by not trying. Sarah sat back down and pulled up one more data stream, this one showing Earth's internal economic indicators since first contact. The numbers told a clear story. Earth's economy was adapting to galactic trade by becoming less efficient, less innovative, and less profitable. The trend was subtle but unmistakable. Arya, model the long-term effects of current trade relationships on Earth's economic development. The AI took several seconds to process the request, longer than usual for such calculations. Modeling complete. Current trends suggest Earth's economic growth rate will decline to galactic average within 15 to 20 years. Innovation metrics show similar deceleration patterns. Prognosis: Earth will achieve stable integration with galactic economic norms at the cost of technological and social progress. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other across the table. The implications were clear. Joining the galactic economy meant accepting galactic limitations on growth and development. So the choice isn't between disrupting the system and maintaining stability, Sarah said slowly. It's between disrupting the system and watching Earth's economy slowly suffocate under galactic regulations. That's how I see it, Marcus agreed. The question is whether we want to control the disruption or let it happen to us. Sarah activated her personal communicator. Get me a conference call with the board of directors, Priority Alpha. And Patch and David Chen at the Colonial Development Authority and Lisa Martinez at Earth Trade Commission. She looked at Marcus. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Full legal review, diplomatic consultation, and extensive modeling before we commit to anything. And if the models show it's too risky, then we find a different approach. But if they show what I think they're going to show. Sarah's expression hardened with determination. Then, Earth is about to give the galaxy its first economics lesson in 9,000 years. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror as the conference call began connecting. He'd started this journey trying to figure out why alien repair prices made no sense. Now he was potentially helping to launch an economic revolution that could reshape interstellar civilization. But, as the first board members began joining the call, he realized that revolution might be exactly what the galaxy needed. 9,000 years of stability had created a civilization that was peaceful, orderly, and completely stagnant. Earth's chaotic, dynamic approach to economics might be exactly the catalyst needed to unlock the galaxy's potential for growth and innovation. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that kind of change, or whether the forces of stability would prove stronger than the promise of progress. Marcus grabbed a cup of coffee and settled in for what was likely to be a very long meeting. By the time it was over, he would either be helping to create a new model for interstellar commerce, or he would be looking for a new line of work that didn't involve alien economic systems. Either way, the galaxy was about to get very interesting. The first speaker on the conference call was David Chen, Marcus's uncle and director of Earth's Colonial Development Authority. His voice carried the weight of someone who had spent decades navigating the intersection of human ambition and galactic politics. Before we go any further, David said, I need everyone to understand the scale of what we're discussing. If Earth is seen as deliberately undermining the consortium's economic system, we could face trade sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or even expulsion from galactic civilization. The consequences would affect every human settlement from here to the outer rim. Understood, Sarah replied. But we also need to understand the consequences of not acting. Marcus has identified fundamental flaws in the galactic economy that are preventing human businesses from thriving. If we can't find a way to make interstellar trade profitable, Earth's expansion efforts are going to stall within a generation. Lisa Martinez's voice joined the conversation from Earth Trade Commission headquarters. I've been reviewing the economic data Marcus compiled. The profit margin disparities are even worse than our preliminary assessments suggested. At current rates, most human companies will be unable to sustain interstellar operations beyond the next 5 years. Marcus leaned forward. The math is pretty simple. We can either find a way to make the galactic system work for human businesses, or human businesses will be forced to withdraw from galactic markets. And if we withdraw, Earth's expansion program becomes economically unsustainable. So what you're proposing, David said slowly, is essentially economic warfare disguised as free market experimentation. I'm proposing economic evolution disguised as practical necessity, Marcus countered. The current system doesn't work for anyone except the bureaucrats who administer it. Even alien businesses are struggling under pricing structures that make innovation impossible and efficiency irrelevant. Sarah activated another display showing comparative economic data from across the galaxy. Look at these productivity metrics. Economic output per capita has been essentially flat across all consortium species for the past 3,000 years. Earth achieves similar output levels in less than 50 years after industrialization. Because Earth's economy rewards innovation and efficiency, Marcus added. The galactic economy penalizes both. The result is technological stagnation, economic inequality, and a civilization that's slowly dying from its own success. The conference call continued for another 2 hours, with board members, government officials, and economic advisors weighing the risks and benefits of Marcus's proposal. The consensus that emerged was cautious but intriguing. Earth needed to find a way to make galactic trade profitable, and the current system made that impossible. But revolution was a dangerous game to play with the stability of interstellar civilization hanging in the balance. By the time the call ended, Marcus had received provisional approval for a limited pilot program. Chen Industries would restructure its internal contracts to use market-based pricing, track the results for 6 months, and prepare a comprehensive analysis of the economic benefits. If the pilot program succeeded, Earth would have the foundation for a broader economic initiative that could reshape its relationship with galactic civilization. If it failed, at least they would have learned something valuable about the limitations of market-based systems in an interstellar context. Marcus left the meeting with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He'd set in motion forces that could lead to unprecedented prosperity for humanity among the stars, or to economic and diplomatic catastrophe that would isolate Earth for generations. But, for the first time since opening his repair shop, he felt like he was working towards something bigger than fixing broken hyperdrives. He was helping to fix a broken galaxy, one economic transaction at a time. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his expanded repair facility watching a team of Zephyrian engineers install a new quantum diagnostic array that he'd never expected to be able to afford. The pilot program had exceeded every projection, and word of Earth's free trade zone had spread through the galaxy faster than anyone had anticipated. The numbers were undeniable. Chen Industries had increased profitability on internal contracts by 340% simply by pricing services according to actual cost and value rather than arbitrary percentages. Other human companies that had joined the program showed similar improvements. More importantly, the increased profits had been reinvested in better equipment, expanded services, and higher wages for workers. But the real surprise had come from an unexpected source: alien businesses that wanted to join the free trade zone. The first had been Captain Zisktal, a crystalline merchant who had been struggling to maintain profitability under the consortium's rigid pricing structure. After seeing the results Marcus was achieving with cost-based pricing, Zisktal had requested permission to restructure his own service contracts according to Earth's model. The results had been dramatic. Within 3 months, Zisktal's transport company had become one of the most efficient cargo services in the sector, offering competitive rates while actually making enough profit to upgrade his fleet and expand his routes. More importantly, Zisktal had started talking to other alien merchants about the benefits of market-based pricing. Word spread through trading networks, and, suddenly, Marcus was receiving inquiries from businesses across dozens of species, all asking about the human economic model. The consortium's response had been swift and predictable. Dr. Kexvalix had arrived at Marcus's shop 3 days earlier with a formal cease and desist order, demanding that he stop destabilizing established trade relationships through unauthorized economic experimentation. Marcus had politely declined to comply. Now, as he watched the Zephyrian engineers, who were working for market rates that actually reflected their expertise, complete the installation of equipment that would have been impossible under the old pricing system, Marcus reflected on how quickly things had changed. His tablet chimed with an incoming priority message from Sarah. The text was brief but urgent: Council meeting tomorrow, Station Gamma 7. Attendance mandatory for all parties involved in economic zone activities. Bring lawyers. Marcus forwarded the message to the legal team that Earth's government had assigned to the Free Trade Zone project, then walked over to check the progress on the diagnostic array. The lead engineer, whose skin was currently a satisfied shade of blue-green, looked up as he approached. Installation is proceeding ahead of schedule, Human Marcus. This equipment will increase your diagnostic capabilities by approximately 300%, according to our calculations. And, it's profitable for your company to provide the installation service? Highly profitable. Under the previous system, a job of this complexity on a facility of this value would have netted approximately 40 credits. Under market-based pricing, we receive 850 credits for the same work. The difference allows us to assign our most experienced engineers to the project and complete it more efficiently. Marcus nodded. That was the pattern they'd seen across the entire free trade zone. When service providers were paid what their work was actually worth, they could afford to do better work. Better work led to better results, which justified the higher prices and created a positive feedback loop of increasing quality and value. The consortium's percentage-based system, by contrast, had created a race to the bottom where service providers had to minimize costs to maintain any profit margin at all. The result was declining quality, longer completion times, and universal dissatisfaction with the state of galactic commerce. There is something else, Human Marcus, the engineer continued. Our company has received inquiries from the Economic Council regarding our participation in your trade zone. They have implied that continued involvement may result in suspension of our trading privileges. What did you tell them? That we would consider their concerns after completing current contractual obligations. But many companies are afraid to join your system, despite the obvious benefits. Marcus sighed. Fear was the consortium's most effective tool for maintaining control. 9,000 years of economic stability had made the galaxy deeply risk-averse, even when the risks involved abandoning a system that demonstrably didn't work. His tablet chimed again, this time with a call from Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's lead economist for interstellar trade. Her face appeared on the screen looking unusually grim. Marcus, we need to talk. The consortium is planning something big for tomorrow's meeting. Our diplomatic sources suggest they're preparing to declare the free trade zone a threat to galactic economic stability. Based on what evidence? We've been tracking every metric they use to measure economic health. Trade volume is up, efficiency is improved, and customer satisfaction ratings are higher than they've been in centuries. That's exactly the problem. The improvements are so dramatic that they're making the rest of the galactic economy look broken by comparison. The Council is worried about systemic instability if other regions start demanding similar reforms. Marcus walked to his office window, which looked out over Earth's busiest commercial spaceport. Ships from dozens of species were loading and unloading cargo, most of it bound for free trade zone participants. The economic activity was visible from orbit, a testament to what happened when businesses were allowed to operate according to market principles rather than bureaucratic guidelines. Elena, the rest of the galactic economy is broken.
We're not creating the problem, we're demonstrating the solution. I agree with you completely.
But, the Council sees it as a threat to their authority.
If market-based pricing becomes the standard, what happens to the Economic Council? What happens to the entire administrative structure they've built over the past 9 millennia?
Marcus hadn't considered the political implications from that angle.
The consortium's economic system wasn't just a set of trade policies, it was the foundation of political power for thousands of bureaucrats across the galaxy. Proving that their system was unnecessary would make them unemployed. So this isn't really about economic stability, he said. It's about job security for galactic bureaucrats.
Partly, yes.
But, there are also legitimate concerns about transition costs.
If the entire galaxy switched to market-based pricing overnight, the adjustment period could be economically chaotic. Not everyone would benefit equally, and some businesses that have adapted to the current system might not survive the change. Then, we make the transition gradual and voluntary.
Nobody's forcing anyone to join the free trade zone. If the old system works better for some businesses, they can keep using it. The Council doesn't see it that way.
They see a competing economic model that threatens the unity of galactic civilization.
Tomorrow's meeting is going to be their attempt to shut down the free trade zone before it spreads any further.
Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. The success of the free trade zone had created exactly the problem he'd hoped to avoid: a direct confrontation between two incompatible economic philosophies. But, maybe confrontation was inevitable. Maybe you couldn't reform a system that had been unchanged for 9,000 years without challenging the people who benefited from keeping it that way.
What's our legal position?
Stronger than they'd like, but weaker than we'd prefer. Earth has the right to set economic policy within its own sphere of influence, but the consortium can argue that our policies are affecting interstellar trade patterns in ways that violate our membership agreements.
And if they try to expel us from the consortium? Then, Earth becomes economically isolated from the galaxy, and our expansion program collapses. It would be a disaster for human civilization.
Marcus watched a massive cargo hauler lift off from the spaceport, its holds full of manufactured goods bound for the Outer Rim colonies.
Earth's economy had become deeply integrated with galactic trade networks over the past 3 months. Cutting those connections would indeed be catastrophic. But, maintaining them under the consortium's terms might be even worse in the long run.
His tablet chimed with another message, this one from Captain Zisktal.
The crystalline merchant's text was brief: Human Marcus. Have received ultimatum from Council.
Join meeting tomorrow to support your economic zone or lose trading license permanently.
Many of us will be there. Change is worth the risk.
Marcus smiled despite his worries. The free trade zone had attracted allies he'd never expected: alien business owners who were tired of economic stagnation and ready to support reforms even at considerable personal risk. The door to his office opened and Sarah walked in, carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression that meant she was prepared for war.
I've been reviewing the Council's legal position, she said without preamble.
They have grounds to restrict Earth's participation in galactic trade, but they don't have grounds to prevent voluntary cooperation between businesses from different species.
If we play this right, we might be able to force them into a compromise. What kind of compromise? Official recognition of the free trade zone as an alternative economic framework within the consortium structure. Voluntary participation, regulatory oversight to prevent abuse, and gradual expansion based on demonstrated results. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You think they'd accept that? I think they'll have to if enough businesses demand it. The economic benefits of market-based pricing are too obvious to ignore. Even Council members must see that their current system is holding back galactic development.
Or they're so invested in maintaining control that they'd rather preserve a broken system than admit they've been wrong for 9,000 years. Sarah set down her briefcase and activated the holographic display in Marcus's office. Economic data filled the air between them: profit margins, efficiency metrics, customer satisfaction scores, and innovation indexes. Every single indicator showed dramatic improvements within the free trade zone compared to traditional consortium-managed trade relationships.
Tomorrow's meeting is going to determine whether the galaxy moves forward or stays frozen in economic amber, Sarah said. The question is whether we're prepared to push as hard as they're prepared to resist.
Marcus looked at the data floating in front of him, then, out at the bustling spaceport beyond his window. 6 months ago, he'd been a simple mechanic trying to figure out why alien repair prices made no sense. Now he was at the center of what might become the most significant economic transformation in galactic history.
I think we need to be prepared to push harder, he said finally. Because if we back down now, the opportunity for reform might not come again for another 9,000 years. Sarah nodded grimly. Then, let's make sure we're ready for the fight. That evening, Marcus worked late in his shop, making final preparations for the next day's confrontation. The diagnostic array was complete and functioning perfectly, a testament to what happened when skilled workers were paid what their expertise was worth. The whole facility hummed with activity as round-the-clock operations served customers who had come to expect the kind of quality and efficiency that market-based pricing made possible. As he locked up for the night, Marcus realized that tomorrow's meeting would determine not just the fate of the free trade zone, but the future direction of galactic civilization. Either the galaxy would embrace economic evolution and unlock its potential for growth and innovation, or it would retreat into bureaucratic stagnation and remain frozen in place for another 9 millennia. The choice was no longer his alone to make. But he'd helped create the conditions that made the choice possible, and that would have to be enough. Tomorrow, the galaxy would decide whether stability was worth the cost of stagnation, or whether the promise of prosperity was worth the risk of change. The council chamber at Station Gamma 7 had been expanded for the emergency session, its curved walls now accommodating representatives from over 40 species. Marcus sat in the human delegation section, watching as aliens he'd never seen before filed into the chamber with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The air hummed with translation fields and the soft glow of recording devices as the galaxy prepared to witness what might become a historic confrontation. Dr. Kexvalix stood at the central podium, her compound eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. This emergency session has been called to address the economic irregularities originating from the Sol system and their potential threat to galactic trade stability. Marcus felt Sarah tense beside him. The consortium was opening with accusations rather than discussion, never a good sign in diplomatic negotiations. Over the past 6 months, Dr. Kexvalix continued, human economic activities have created systematic disruptions in established pricing structures, resulting in unfair competitive advantages and destabilization of traditional trade relationships. A murmur ran through the chamber as various species began commenting through their translation devices. Marcus caught fragments of the conversation, some supportive, others clearly opposed to the consortium's position. The so-called free trade zone represents an unauthorized deviation from established economic protocols, Dr. Kexvalix pressed on. If allowed to continue, these practices could undermine the stability that has maintained galactic peace for 9 millennia. Captain Zisktal rose from the crystalline delegation section, his translucent form shimmering with agitation. With respect, Dr. Kexvalix, the human trade zone has increased our company's profitability by 400% while reducing service costs for our customers by 15%. How exactly does prosperity threaten stability? By creating unsustainable competitive pressures that force other businesses to either join the irregular system or face economic disadvantage, Dr. Kexvalix replied smoothly. This is precisely the type of economic warfare that the consortium system was designed to prevent. Marcus stood up, knowing he was probably violating diplomatic protocol but no longer caring. Dr. Kexvalix, with respect, you're describing market competition as if it were a disease. What you call unsustainable competitive pressures, we call incentives for innovation and efficiency. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien vocalizations as dozens of species began debating simultaneously. Dr. Kexvalix clicked her mandibles for order, but it took several minutes for the noise to subside. Human Marcus Chen, she said formally, you are not recognized to speak in this forum. Sarah stood smoothly. Then, perhaps I should speak for the human delegation. Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing Earth's commercial interests in this matter. Dr. Kexvalix's antennae twitched with annoyance, but she nodded. The human delegation is recognized. Sarah activated her tablet, projecting economic data into the chamber's central display space. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment of the consortium's entire economic philosophy. "The data speaks for itself," Sarah said calmly. "Every business that has voluntarily joined the free trade zone has seen dramatic improvements in profitability, efficiency, and customer satisfaction. Trade volume within the zone has increased by 250%. Innovation metrics show the highest levels of technological development in recorded galactic history. Temporary anomalies resulting from unsustainable practices," Dr. Kex-Velix countered. "The human system rewards short-term profit maximization at the expense of long-term stability. Long-term stability requires continuous adaptation and improvement," Sarah replied. "The consortium system has achieved stability by preventing change, but that's not sustainability, it's stagnation." A new voice entered the debate from the vegan delegation section. "If the human system is so superior, why has it produced economic crises, inequality, and environmental destruction on their homeworld?" Marcus felt the entire chamber's attention focus on him. This was the argument he'd been preparing for, the criticism that Earth's dynamic economy came at an unacceptable cost in social and environmental stability. "Because we learned from our mistakes," he said, standing again despite Dr. Kex-Velix's disapproving glare. "Every economic crisis taught us something about managing market forces more effectively. Every period of inequality led to innovations in wealth distribution and social safety nets. Every environmental problem drove technological solutions that made our civilization more sustainable." He gestured to the economic data still floating in the chamber's center. "The difference between Earth and the galactic economy isn't that we avoided problems, it's that we were allowed to solve them. Your system prevents problems by preventing progress. Our system creates problems and, then, innovates solutions. Creating problems is hardly a virtue," Dr. Kex-Velix observed. "It is when the alternative is stagnation," Marcus shot back. "How many galactic civilizations have found solutions to poverty, disease, or resource scarcity in the past 9,000 years? How many have achieved significant improvements in living standards or technological capabilities?" The chamber fell silent. The answer was obvious to everyone present: none. Captain Zisktal rose again. "The human raises an important point. Crystalline civilization has faced the same resource management challenges for the past 3 millennia. Under consortium economic policies, we lack sufficient incentives to develop solutions. The profit margins don't justify the research costs. Because the consortium system doesn't reward innovation," Marcus added. "If you develop a better technology, the Economic Council assigns it a value based on resource content and complexity. There's no premium for being better than what came before. There's no competitive advantage for solving problems that everyone else considers unsolvable." A mantoid delegate activated her speaking apparatus. "The human system would create winners and losers. Some civilizations might prosper while others decline. The consortium system ensures equal treatment for all members." "Equal stagnation isn't the same as equal opportunity," Sarah replied. "The free trade zone proves that when businesses are allowed to compete and innovate, everyone benefits. Even our lowest performing participants show better results than average consortium trade relationships." Dr. Kex-Velix had been consulting with other council members during the exchange. Now she stepped back to the podium with what Marcus recognized as a prepared statement. "The Economic Council acknowledges that the human trade zone has produced certain short-term benefits. However, we cannot allow unauthorized economic experimentation to threaten the stability of galactic civilization. Therefore, the Council has prepared the following resolution." A holographic document appeared in the chamber's center. Marcus felt his heart sink as he read the text. It was essentially an ultimatum requiring Earth to abandon market-based pricing and return to consortium economic protocols within 30 days. "This resolution will be put to a vote," Dr. Kex-Velix announced. "Member species will decide whether to maintain established economic stability or risk chaos in pursuit of uncertain benefits." Marcus looked around the chamber, trying to gauge the mood of the various delegations. Some species seemed sympathetic to the human position, but others clearly favored the consortium's approach. The vote could go either way. Then, Captain Zisktal stood again, but this time he wasn't alone.
Representatives from nearly a dozen species rose with him, all businesses that had joined the free trade zone or had been considering it. Dr. Kexvelix, Captain Zisktal said formally, "We invoke Article 47 of the Consortium Charter, the right to petition for alternative trade arrangements when existing policies prove inadequate to member needs." Marcus had never heard of Article 47, but, judging by the expression on Dr. Kexvelix's face, it was significant. "Article 47 requires proof of systemic inadequacy," she said carefully. "Such petitions have never been granted." "They've never been filed," Captain Zisktal replied. "Until today." Sarah was frantically checking something on her tablet. She looked up with surprise and, what might have been hope. Article 47 was included in the original consortium charter as a safety valve, she whispered to Marcus. If enough member businesses petition for alternative trade arrangements, the Council has to consider them. Captain Zisktal continued his statement. "We represent 37 business entities from 15 different species. All have experienced significant benefits from market-based pricing. All petition for formal recognition of alternative economic frameworks within the consortium structure." The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise seemed more supportive than hostile. Marcus realized that the free trade zone had attracted more allies than even he had known about. Dr. Kexvelix consulted urgently with her fellow council members. After several minutes of heated discussion, she returned to the podium. The Council recognizes the petition under Article 47. However, such a significant change to economic policy requires extensive study and gradual implementation to prevent systemic disruption. How extensive? How gradual? Sarah asked. A minimum of 50 years of analysis and testing, followed by phased implementation over another century. Marcus felt his hopes deflate. 150 years of bureaucratic delay would kill any momentum for economic reform. By the time the Council finished studying the issue, everyone involved in the current effort would be dead. But Captain Zisktal wasn't finished. Dr. Kexvelix, the petition includes a request for immediate interim measures. We propose the establishment of voluntary economic zones where member businesses can participate in market-based pricing while the Council conducts its analysis. Such zones would need extensive oversight to prevent abuse, Dr. Kexvelix replied, but her tone suggested she was considering the proposal. Agreed, Sarah said quickly. Earth proposes a joint oversight committee with representatives from both the Economic Council and participating businesses. Full transparency, regular reporting, and authority to modify or terminate the program if it proves harmful to galactic economic stability. Marcus watched the Council members debate among themselves. The proposal wasn't everything he'd hoped for. It included bureaucratic oversight that would slow down innovation, but it was something. It would allow the free trade zone to continue and expand while giving the Council enough control to feel comfortable with the arrangement. The Council will consider the proposal, Dr. Kexvelix announced finally. Pending further study, current free trade zone activities may continue under enhanced oversight provisions. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. The galaxy had just taken its first tentative step toward economic evolution in 9,000 years. As the session adjourned and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Marcus found himself surrounded by alien business owners who wanted to discuss joining the free trade zone. The interest was overwhelming, dozens of companies from species he'd never heard of, all asking about market-based pricing and voluntary economic frameworks. Captain Zisktal approached him with what might have been a smile on his crystalline features. "Human Marcus, you have accomplished something remarkable today. Change is never easy, especially when it challenges systems that have existed for millennia." "We're just getting started," Marcus replied. "This is only the beginning." And it was. Over the following months, the voluntary economic zones expanded rapidly as more businesses discovered the benefits of market-based pricing. The Council's Oversight Committee proved surprisingly cooperative, more interested in understanding the new system than blocking it. Economic growth accelerated across participating regions, creating a positive feedback loop that made the benefits of reform impossible to ignore. 3 years later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of his new orbital repair facility, watching ships from dozens of species dock for services that would have been impossible under the old pricing system. The free trade zone had become a network of economic zones spanning half the galaxy, and the consortium was preparing to phase out percentage-based pricing entirely in favor of market mechanisms. It hadn't been a revolution, it had been an evolution, gradual but irreversible. The galaxy was finally learning that prosperity came not from preventing change, but from embracing it wisely. Marcus smiled as he watched a Zephyrian cargo hauler dock at Bay 7. The captain had sent a message ahead requesting a full hyperdrive overhaul, paying market rates that reflected the actual value of the work rather than arbitrary percentages based on ship value. It was a small thing, really one repair job among thousands. But it represented something larger, a galaxy that had finally learned to value work for what it was worth, innovation for what it could achieve, and change for what it could create. Sometimes the most important revolutions started with the simplest questions. In Marcus's case, it had been, why should fixing a hyperdrive cost different amounts depending on what ship it's in? The answer, it turned out, was that it shouldn't. And, once the galaxy accepted that simple truth, everything else followed naturally. Marcus Chen, former mechanic from Ohio, had become something he'd never expected, the person who taught a galaxy how to grow again. Not through grand theories or political manifestos, but through the practical application of common sense to economic problems that had been overcomplicated for millennia. As he headed back to his office to review the day's work orders, Marcus reflected on the irony that saving galactic civilization had started with nothing more complicated than trying to run an honest repair shop. Sometimes the best solutions were the simplest ones. You just had to be willing to ask why things were the way they were, and brave enough to try something different when the answer didn't make sense. The galaxy was finally ready for both.